Hello and welcome to the Novel Creature Network. I'm Montrez here, and we are connecting our readers with amazing creatives and authors like our guest here today, none other than the amazing E.M. Lacey, who is a author of dark fantasy and YA, and also one of my fellow author friends from our latest release, which is a top release thanks to you guys. Our latest release, Once Upon a Realm, a YA fairy tale inspired anthology. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be here. Yay.
So it it has been, the anthology was so amazing. One of the things, I'm so thankful to KRS McIntyre for putting us all together and connecting. We did connect on a prior project though. We worked on you worked on I believe it was the one with Jessica Cage and the Eldridge trial.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I got to check that out and talk to some of you guys with that and kind of peek at your work. But it's great to actually be working with you on another anthology. So thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Um, but tell us, what is your author origin story?
Ah, let's see. Well, when I was little, I've always had like an overactive imagination. And I was always a big reader. Like out of all my siblings, I was usually the one in a corner with a book. And I just, over time, I got to tap into that imagination and funnel it into actual stories. Because the one thing that I think that I've always loved stories. And I used to, my grandma growing up, like I would spend a lot of time with my grandma. And my grandma had these rules. You watch TV when grandma watches TV. And when TV is not on, she had her radio on. And she listened to a lot of country music. And country music has stories, they just always tell a story. And the one song that just sort of stuck with me, that had me in front of the radio just like mesmerized, was Charlie Daniels band The Devil Went Down to Georgia. And I remember sitting there, and I was young, like really young, and I was like, he's playing against the devil. Oh no, you can't do that. He's gonna get you. And I'm just sitting there waiting to see how it was gonna end. And just loving story. I've just always loved story. And I think that sort of bleeds into, just my work. And I would say I'm excited just about the indie community, because the one thing I can say that the indie community has done is given voice to others, like indigenous voices, Black voices. For the longest time, I had never really read another Black author except for Alex Haley, Roots, Queen, those kind of things. But what's great is that I actually met Tananarive Due because I'm from Florida originally, like from Miami, Florida. And she used to be a columnist at the Miami Herald.
Oh,
And I worked in the cafeteria. And eventually I worked in we did prep for the newspapers. It sort of tells my age, because back in the day, everything was like laid out and they made the plates to put on the press and all that stuff. But it was a cool era, because being in the cafeteria, everyone comes through, so you meet everybody. And then eventually, doing what I did, I got to go to different floors and, just struck up a conversation with her. And she's just always been cool people. And it was neat to be around her right when she was in the process of publishing The Between. And it's like, I've been like a devout fan forever, because I just love her writing style. And it was just neat to see someone that looks like me writing one horror, and being published by a mainstream publisher. I'm
yes.
like, that was like, ooh, because the only authors that I was familiar with, was of course Alex Haley. But when it comes to horror, sci fi, there wasn't very many who looked like me,
Right.
and so there was either Stephen King, Dean Koontz, those kind of people, but then you have Tananarive Due. And then knowing Tananarive Due, you're going to find out about Octavia Butler. And
Right.
so I started reading Octavia Butler, and just I love Octavia's work. And I love, like, I read all of Lilith's Brood.
Mhm.
um I read, my favorite like was Fledgling, and I picked up on a couple of her short stories. Like, one of my favorites is Speech Sounds. And Speech Sounds is just how she can take a bus in the middle of dystopia and just do an expose on humanity. I was like,
Yep.
what? But that's skill. And I hope when I grow up as an author, I can get to that point, because I mean, she had skill. I love her work.
Gosh, yes, you have name dropped some greats there. That's amazing that you got to work with Miss Dew, really?
Yeah, it's like, hey, here's your food.
That-
Thank you.
yes. So that's first of all, that's really cool that like your love of storytelling, like is connected to country music. And then like to because it is something you do, a lot of songs do have that storytelling aspect in it. Is
Mhm.
there any musical like any like musical references in your work?
Uh, I think I have one musical reference that's in Big's Mind the Vampire, and I might switch that up. What is it? It's like a lyric from Drake, one of Drake's songs. Like, what is it? I think is it like "Mommy, Do You Love Me?" Whatever. It's like, I cannot. I don't know the title of it, but it was just cool, and I switched the lyrics, but I used that sort of lyrical beat, I guess you could say, as the daughter's communicating with her mom. So, she made a wordplay on using Drake's song. So that's about it. But not so much. I think most of my work focuses, it's always that sort of outsider outcast,
Mhm.
and it's not like, oh, woe with me, I don't know who I am, but just really that person saving themselves.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've learned over time that, having friendships, having people there in your corner is great. But a lot of the times you have to learn how to rescue yourselves. You have to learn how to sort of bounce back when you get like hit hard, to work your way back up.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's so true. Like people can only take us as far as, we can go. And then sometimes we have to give that extra push for ourselves, because we've all got our own weights and our own struggles. And so that's so true. And that kind of leads me to our next question. What is your creative superpower? So you said you write about outsiders and kind of like, would you say like underdogs? Um,
Yeah, sort of like the forgotten,
mhm,
because I think I feel like my superpower is more an idea.
mhm.
Like the three, like when we did our author takeover, the three prompts that I put together have already become stories. I'm like, oh, here we go again. So I've jotted them down, and I'm putting them to the side because I'm already working on some more stuff. But I'm an idea person. But I think because of I think my age and just my perspective on life, like I love kids. I think they're the coolest little people, and I love their perspective and how they look at stuff. And just with most kids, if you sit at their level and just talk to them and pay attention, that's the best thing, and that's the best thing ever. And I have a collection of shorts in a novel, like in a novel called it's a mini anthology, Minor Mischief. And each one, the main characters are little. The first one starts with a 4-year-old necromancer,
Oh my
Patrick,
gosh.
and he wakes up his grandma at her home going. And
Oh,
that's when things get fun, because he's little and he doesn't understand, you know, death. What's that? And his power doesn't help because he can see things that people can't. And then that little story came about by just an old wives' tale, like something that my grandma and my, the elders in my family would always talk about, how children can see angels, children can see spirits. And I'm like, okay, how about this? Usually, I don't know, for me, my grandparents tend to be my most favorite people because grandparents are full of stories.
Yes. Yes.
Whenever you sit with your grandparent, it's like they not only stories, but they know stuff. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And they're like, they'll explain things and break down life for you. And I just think they're the coolest people as well. But for Patrick, his grandma was like the best. And when he woke her up, he was like just watching all the chaos happen. And he's like, what's wrong with them? They know you. And he didn't get it. But part of it, I think the underlying story was just, just how, what would happen if you have a child comes into these great powers? What's
Right.
going to shape him? It's the people around. And that's sort of like the underlying message. It's just, it literally does take a village to raise a child, not their
Mhm.
TV, not the game, but it's the people in their life. And that's sort of like that quiet story under all the stuff that was going on in Minor Mischief, and it just sort of explores just the different perspectives from a child's point of view of the world. Like there's one, I did a different other interview, and the interviewer had her favorite story was Pinky Swear, and just how when you're young, if an adult makes a promise, it's sacred. And if you do the pinky swear, I'm like, that's like the unbreakable
Right.
promise. And the power of a promise to a child, and how one child comes back from the dead to protect her brother because she promised she'd keep him safe.
Wow.
And I love her to death because she's like, about 8. She's like, she likes to wear tights, lots of colors. She has a tutu and a lopsided afro puff, but she stands on business when it comes to her brother. And so just being able to explore the different viewpoints of children. For like the one, I have a little guy who's in school. He has a vampire problem, but because he's young, no one believes him.
Mhm.
And so he has to figure out what to do. So I just love, like, just viewing the world through someone else's eyes. And I feel like it's easy for me to write about kids because I get them, I guess.
And that is a superpower, because I think a lot of times when we grow up, we lose that quality to connect to our childhood, and to, what I mean, and to see from their perspective. Some people can be really dismissive of kids, or downplay their experiences, when, like you said, like, kids are sharp.
Yeah, they're very sharp.
Honestly, I have a 2-year old, a 7 and an 8-year old, and they are like my little writer brain trust. With the current book that I'm writing now, I actually told them the story, and they were finding plot holes.
That's funny.
They were like my toughest critic. So, like, I shared some of the other things that I wanted to do, for my teen audience. And of course I told it in a way that made sense to them. And, they were like, okay, well, this is good. Make sure you add this, or did you think about that? So, I mean, kids are really, when you involve them and invite them, and especially in like the creative process, there's so many benefits to it. Like, you get that honesty, you've got their imagination, and
Mhm.
like you said, you've got that connection. It takes like a village to raise kids, and so you've hit like a passionate subject for me. Like, I really like to involve my kids in what I do, so they're not like, mommy, you're working more than you talk to us. No, let's all do something, or let's explore different things. And so, I wholeheartedly agree. Like kids are amazing. I get so many ideas just from playing with my kids.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then like the element, like with grandparents and like our family elders, you bring back so many good memories
Mm-hmm.
for that because my grandparents used to tell stories and they always had the best storytelling voices. You know,
Oh yeah.
like and the way they could paint stories with their just with their words, you could see it clearly, and they could make you like chills would just raise up on your arms, or you'd be like the TV would be playing in the background and no one's paying attention because grandma's telling about stories from back in the day. So I think that's awesome that you pull inspiration from those perspectives and those connections.
Oh yeah. Because
Definitely
then
are.
I think about like when we talk about power, and I think with minor mischief,
Mhm.
just that potential.
Yes.
That's what the power is. It's like that power can grow into anything. So, children can become anything.
And that's such a cool pitch. Like you said, he's a 4-year old necromancer.
Yeah, a 4-year
That
old
is
necromancer.
was like you said, the potential in that is like amazing, but it's also frightening. What like a 4-year old um, with that level of power, so that's really cool. You don't hear a lot of people you know showcasing like fantastical, like urban fantasy, paranormal, or supernatural things from that perspective. So that pitch is pretty powerful. Guys, dig into minor mischief.
Oh,
um,
yeah. Because I actually, it's like I had a lot of fun writing it because it was just fun to write because you're watching your kid. I feel like I'm watching my kids do stuff. Like I tend to write dark. And
Mhm.
it's like, it's funny because I was thinking about it yesterday. It's like I always tend to write dark because I feel like as we grow as people, we're working our way out of some form of darkness.
Great.
So it's always that one thing that we're just trying to conquer. Like, just even as an author, I'm like, I'll read some of my work and I'm like, wow, this is great. But meanwhile, I'm like, I don't know how to write. Oh my God. No, no, no. So it's like you're working your way out. And I feel like we're always working our way out of something. And I feel like that's my fascination with dark fantasy. And with the YA, I don't know. I think I think it's good for, young adults.
Mhm.
I would say as a parent, test it, see what you think, and then, share with them. I think minor miss like the homegoing is the top one. Um, Magic and Kisses, it, it's a little grim toward the end.
Mhm.
And then Pinky Swear is one of those stories where you have like it has to do with a child who died.
Mhm.
So that's a topic that I'm not sure how parents are going to feel about talking about that with a kid. But there's always ghost stories. I read The Forgotten Girl.
Yep.
I think it's India Hill, but that was a really good story. It's a YA. It's about and I feel like when it comes to reading, it depends on the child,
Mhm.
not so much the book itself, but the child.
And can we talk about how, like, I think that when a lot of people think of children's stories and YA books, they think it's light, fluffy, or it's, not complex or whatever.
Mhm.
But some of the most complex and interesting stories that I have read are YA. They handle some really rough issues, rough topics in such a way that just really resonates. And so, you know, my hat's off to you, number one, because again, that's super cool. You've got like such young protagonists that are doing these like really unique things that, you don't usually hear about. Usually it's a 17-year-old or a 20 something year old. And so it's really, really cool. And I'm excited to read that. It kind of reminds me too of like R.L. Stein. You
Yeah,
he has like horror books and things out like that, that touch on like some really fun but also sometimes really scary things. So
yeah,
it's really cool to be able to know an indie friend who is doing that, and in our space. So I'm really excited to see that. But along those lines, we talked about some of your strengths and your really cool, unique ideas. And maybe you touched on this a little bit, but what's your kryptonite?
My kryptonite, honestly, is those voices in my head, my inner critic, that whole imposter syndrome. And I try to stay off of social media when I'm writing or working on something because while I'm writing, what gets me is all those like those experts that are everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't, it's like, because I try not to really read reviews and I try not to, like, when I see an expert pass across my screen, I'm like, okay, scroll, because I just can't. Because when I'm sitting down to write, that person's know-how will filter in, and it's like I'm not writing in my flow. I'm criticizing. So I'll write a little bit. Ah, that's not right. Delete. Write a little bit. That's not right. Delete. And also being intimidated by part of the critic thing, it's feeling like I'm grammatically incompetent because, I like commas, I like run on sentences, I like all those lovely things that are not acceptable. But, those are my issues. And it's like, I'm working on taking my issues and putting them aside. And one way I tackle that is I have tons of notebooks. So I write longhand because when I'm writing longhand, I feel like I'm in the story. It may be jacked up and I might need a translator to, figure out what I wrote. But yeah, but I write better and I'm more in the story when I do it longhand. And then I can just type it in and, clean it up. But that helps me to overcome that critic because I can't be critical if I'm writing it with my own hand. And I feel like it hits that paranormal space where I feel like my character is using me to express themselves more because I'm writing, and they're using my hand. Because I feel like as creatives, as writers, we're just transcribers. Like we are that court stenographer writing out what the characters are doing. And we might embellish here or there, but we're dictating their story and they're just telling it to us.
Definitely. So I totally get that the writing, like the longhand, is definitely a different feel than when you're sitting in front of like a computer. It is harder to like self edit, like, or to erase. I mean, we can still be critical, but it's something about the intimacy and the connection with your story when you're doing it longhand. I, I
Yeah.
I totally feel that. And, there's so much truth to what you're saying. And I think something to note is the importance of being able to protect like your creativity and your creative headspace. I'm a champion for having healthy creativity. Just, and creating is more than just, you know, um, writing or artwork. Creativity is sometimes solving problems, putting business plans together, doing all kinds of stuff. And so, to anybody who's watching, who's creating anything, you're trying to make something of your life that's not there or that you want to see. Like, this is wisdom right here. You have to know how to protect your environment and your space for what you're trying to create. So I think it's awesome that you know the things that like trigger that inner critic, because it is something that you're going to, we face it all the time. And so knowing how to deal with those triggers and knowing how to deal with that, or else, we probably wouldn't create.
Yeah.
We'd probably be stuck in a cycle of this is great, this is trash, this is great, I think it's good, so just having those systems in place. But that's pure wisdom there. So
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
so much for sharing that.
And then I have friends who like verbally smack me when I'm being like, I don't know, smack, smack. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yep, having that support system is key. Like if it hadn't been for my mom and my
Hmm.
writer friend who edited my first book would have been in the trash. And that would have been a waste because so many people have said that they enjoy it. So I'm beginning to think that imposter syndrome and having an inner critic that's loud is actually a sign that we might be doing something right.
I think I'm starting to get that finally. Because it's like whenever my mind is fighting the story, it's running into that wall. It's fear. And it's like you're about to cross a barrier.
Yeah.
And it's just the brain doesn't want to. Because I think it's actually a science thing where the brain doesn't like change. Like it's like it fights it because it's not comfortable. And it's like protecting itself. I'm like, wait, I need to get past this.
Yep. So sound wonderful advice. So be encouraged, everyone. If that inner critic is loud, you're doing something right. Keep going. But that's awesome. Now you've already given us like a really compelling like story. Like I'm ready to just like pause this interview and just like go ahead and download Minor Mischief because it sounds totally amazing. So, guys, if you're watching this and you want to pause and come back, or while you're listening, go ahead and check out the show notes. Go ahead and get that book and get everything else she's got going. But take us on a tour of the worlds that you've built in Minor Mischief and beyond. Like if you were a tour guide and we were to dive into your worlds, what are the highlights?
Okay, so let's see. For a tour of my worlds, I will start with the one series that I'm in the process of completing, my Biggs, Meyer and the Vampire, where a bloodstained son comes from, my story in the Once Upon a Realm anthology. Um, Basically, in the world of Biggs and Meyer, over time, the paranormals have figured, humanity is outgrowing the paranormals because they can do the one thing that they can't without human blood diluting the purity of paranormal blood is breed. They can't have children, or it's difficult for them to have children, at least in my world. So the powers that be, namely the elders among them, they have made a covenant with humanity. And a part of that covenant is they're aware that humans are reckless. And humans are aware that humans are reckless. And so, with the covenant, they've come up with laws to mediate between humans and paranormals. And there's a small firm in this little suburb called Covenant, Illinois. They're called Biggs and Meyer. It's two friends who are lawyers and they've created their firm, and they represent humans who get themselves in a paranormal pickle.
I love
And
that.
so the first case happens to be a guardianship case because all of a sudden this vampire is really gunning to become the guardian of this little girl named Alba. And Alba's being adopted. She's in the process of being adopted by a local community. She's like a community activist. She like serves the community, and she's a single woman. She's up in age, so she's like, I want to leave my legacy to someone, and teach. So she's in the process of adopting Alba, who's like a little Afro Latina. Um, she's got her little afro. She has her braids, and she just likes turquoise and like she likes turquoise, that kind of thing. And so she's pretty unique because when she gets mad, it gets hot around her, but no one really knows that part yet. She doesn't remember where she comes from. All she knows is the life that she has with her new guardian. So the little firm is defending Alba and her guardian from this crazy vampire. And things sort of escalate from there. And in the second story, let's say Spirit Box, the world continues and we add a new element. We have Aurora Dixon, who originates from Florida. And there's a, I feel like it's a bridge story that's, I'm working on a bridge story that sort of fills in the gap between Aurora's arrival to the Biggs firm and her life beforehand. And I'm tackling the whole powers coming in at your non typical time, where I will have a necromancer, but she's super unique, but she is way older than your teenage years. She's not in her 20s, she's not in her 30s, she's up there. So,
We need more of that. So
yeah.
that's right up.
And it's like her powers kick in a desperate time where it's like she's done something where she kills someone accidentally, and that accidental murder is going to get her murdered. So she's like, I need this, I need this werewolf because she's killed a werewolf. She's like, I need it to be alive. And her powers kick in. It's a crisis mode. So her powers kick in. She's new to her powers. And she's also not your glamorous character. Like she's someone who, even like in her upper years, she's made a lot of mistakes, and the kind of mistakes that they're very hard to correct. And if you're used to quitting, you usually sort of fall back into those bad habits. So she's not like a, oh my God, I'm blonde, or oh my God, I'm just this youthful, awesome, like I got all this. She is not, you know. And so she's one of those where it's like you have someone who is poor or struggling and you win a lottery. That's sort of her situation. Her powers are her lottery. But then how do you spend that lottery money? And I feel like her powers in the story that I'm working on is more of an examination of, okay, so she's been lifted up because of this, but then when you're introduced to that world, do you really like it? And then what are you going to do with that? So that's one of the worlds where the bloodstained sun comes from. And I hinted at Alba's true history in Spirit Box, which is the second book in the Biggs of Myers series. And she has a flashback. And it's a flashback of her walking up a pyramid, like an Aztec pyramid, and she's behind Jaguar warriors. So with a bloodstained sun, it's more of an exploration of how she got there. What happened that she lost her memory? What is she really? And I feel like a bloodstained sun is a secret that the readers will know, that the characters and the stories won't. They won't know the full potential of who she really is. And then once she recalls her past, what's going to happen?
See,
So,
now you are diving into so much here.
oh
Um,
yeah.
Now we're going to get into Bloodstained Sun in a minute, but like, can we talk about like the first two books here? Because I think some of the things that are exciting about this, number one, you have atypical heroes.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a child hero. You have an older woman who sounds really relatable. Just dealing with everyday situations that don't aren't fixed with like a tiny little bow wrapped around it. I think that's really relatable. So having these characters that are atypical but relatable. So typically in urban fantasy, the supernatural world is kind of swept under the rug and nobody wants to let that cat out of the bag. But you have stories like the Sippy Stackhouse novels, True Blood, and some other ones where there is kind of like, everything is kind of out in the light or coming to the light, where the general population is aware that there's like the existence of like others, particularly those that have like special abilities or supernatural things going on. So in a world like yours, like what does that look like? Or
the paranormal and just humans are aware of just their own kind's nature. Just
Mhm.
with the for the paranormals, you have the immortalum. They are the, the elders of each type. Like they're like they some are a millennia in age. They're very aware of their own nature, very arrogant. How dare you make an alliance with these humans? We don't need to get along with them. They're food, they're this, they're that. But they're the ones with the elders are the ones with the wherewithal that, like, we need to get along with them because they have this thing we don't have, technology. Yeah, so they can get us if they want to. And they're self-destructive by nature. So imagine that coming against us with a grudge. Technology sort of counters, the paranormal's powers or magic. It's like a vampire can't fight if it's asleep.
Right.
So that's the danger. So there, it's like the superpowers making a treaty to, we will not go to war. Our side won't kill your side if we do what we're supposed to do. And if we, if people have beef, therefore we have the night court, which is, it's a neutral zone for
Mhm.
humans and paranormals. Because for the paranormals, night is their time. And for humans, you got the party animals, night is their time. But if they want to face their accusers or be able to meet them on level ground, they're going to have to come to night court. That's where the Biggs and Meyer team, they come in, where they're trained in the laws, because Fey law is tricky. Vampires can
Oh,
be
yeah.
tricky.
Yep.
So that's the stuff that they're learning. And also, sort of marrying that with human law, that's going to have to be altered when it comes to night court. So that's where I'm bridging to the next, like the first real battle, because this book originally was just going to be a short story.
Mhm.
But that short story, when I kill, let's say, and I feel like I'm telling too much, but this vampire is not going to die, although it seems like it, because he's got stuff going on. He's got things to do. He doesn't have time to die. So he had a trick. This vampire has a plan B, C, D,
Uh-oh.
D.2, E.3. Like, he has plans upon plans. And it's like, I loved writing him because he's annoying, arrogant, but I just like him. It's like you love to hate him because he's got, he's,
Okay.
flip at the lip, whatever. But he is who he is. And I'm like, the elders knew about, there will be there will be creatures like him. And then humans, as soon as you say don't do it, what are people going to do? Run and do it. So Biggs and Meyer, stand the gap. Why are you at the Fey Mound? So yes, your family has been cursed for eternity. How do we get that off? We got to go to court. So I'm like, being realistic, in reality, people, we are self-destructive. We don't believe that, I don't know. It's just that there's just an arrogance that's a part of our nature,
Right.
where if
Oh,
something comes and it's,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, it comes along and it's supposed to be stronger. One of my favorite movies, it's not like the best movie, but The Day the Earth Stood Still, same thing. You've got an alien, and you're going to tell this alien, who you don't really know what he's got, how dare you, blah, 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 da, da, da. I'm like,
Right.
he could probably think you to death. What do you say? You should be offering him coffee. Like,
Right.
here's some coffee. Here's a little cake. No, no, no. But no, we go and we just immediately go on the offensive. And I'm like, stand back, look, learn, see. Can you make a treaty? Can you make an agreement? Can you get along? It's like the Rodney King. Can we all get along? Same thing. We just go, you know, I'm going to rebel. And that rebellion gets you killed.
I'm touching on so many really amazing little intricacies here and nuances. It sounds like there's going to be some humor in there, a lot of wordplay, a lot of really cool scenarios to kind of like get into. And then, just looking at like the intricacies of what makes us like human, what, like what it means, like how our flaws can work for us and against us. And just, if we're looking for a really good character driven story, but something with a fun and unique plot, this is where it's at. But let's talk about a bloodstained sun. You mentioned that a little bit, um, and how it kind of fits into this world. Before we get into it, guys, if you're not familiar, if you haven't been following or you've somehow forgotten, don't forget to check out our top new release, Once Upon a Realm. It
Mhm.
brings six of us authors who write YA teen books, but from diverse worlds. If you like what E.M. Lacey has going on here, you can pick up Once Upon a Realm and learn more about a bloodstained sun and how that plays into the world she's created here. But can you give us just a little taste of what we can expect in this story? Maybe a couple of fun facts for those who have read it and maybe haven't picked up on certain elements.
Let me see. I know everything takes place in the Aztec nation, and I wanted it to be just sort of the end of it. All takes place basically right before the collapse, and I feel like that's sort of symbolic of someone's transition into like a new life. And for her, you know, again, it's just the whole, I feel like it's always the whole idea of identity. And then also taking for granted, like when someone gives you seeds of wisdom or someone gives you advice, just deciding, I'm not going to take it. And sort of her not taking advice puts her in her situation. And then, the whole idea of family sometimes isn't about your blood family, but it's just that found family. So I feel like for that piece, it embodies the whole idea of Snow White. It's just, I didn't want her to be, I don't know, from Disney's Snow White to even reading the story. I'm like, Snow White, why aren't you just so ditzy? She was just no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. Like,
Really innocent. Yeah.
yes, just oblivious. And and just for my character, she had her own way. I feel like she had her own sense of oblivion, like of being oblivious, but it was like those quiet, unseen pushes, from those who love her that sort of, helped her to set herself up to be saved. I feel like that's how the story really flows. It's like she chooses not to listen, and then her not listening sort of causes a catastrophe. But then there were contingency plans made by those who cared for her, and in the end it works out for her, to her good. So that's pretty much a bloodstained sun in a nutshell. And I feel like it may not be for everybody because, again, I write dark. And a fairy tale in the Aztec nation is not going to be, oh my God, there are birds singing everywhere. No, that's not going to be the situation. You have a psychotic, instead of an evil queen, you have a priest who's like nuts, but he's also smart, and he doesn't have like he's not sending out like a minion, like a huntsman to go, hey, go kill this girl, blah, blah, blah. No, he's going to do stuff himself. So
Oh,
he's supervising the murder, that's his plan.
right.
But he has an even grander plan. And again, it's the whole idea of that obsession with power, that obsession with, I need to be, I need to be on the top of the pyramid. I need to be in the heavens with God. I need to be there. And I feel like that's always an issue. That's always the thing. And that's always the thing that divides just people who are trying to, live day to day to those who, well, I just need to, you know, crush them under my thumb so I can feel better, so I can feel powerful. I feel like that's always the dynamic when it comes to humanity. But then in this case, it's like the whole idea of, I think there's a line in the story where the guy where the you have your my villain is like, I've done it. And then he literally, looks into the face of his victim, but from her mouth the words of a god come out. And as if, you thought you could fool me, huh? It's like, oh, how do you face that when you're faced with the consequences of your actions? And the consequences of his actions are going to be pretty intense. But it's like, it was a challenge because, again, I feel like when I've been writing, I've been working through that whole imposter syndrome and just second guessing myself, and technically second guessing the story and not letting my story be. And I feel like when you're not letting your story be, it's not its best. Like, I'm sort of muting the voices of the characters. And I will say the tricky part is the whole time travel thing. I'm going to play with that because I'm going to do some more stuff and just perfect that, because time travel is tricky to write.
It can be. It can be. But I think that's really cool because it's a unique play on, one of those classic tales like Snow White in an Aztec setting. That's
Mm-hmm.
really, really cool. And so, and then just again, like those reoccurring themes of how like the people we love can help shape our, how they can impact our potential and how our choices can impact them. And so I think, just really compelling stuff here. And then just really unique characters to kind of connect with. And I love that you see your characters kind of as like the, they're in charge here, and you're just telling a story. Who are you? You're just the author. The characters are the boss, right?
Oh yeah, they're the boss of me.
And there's something about that. I noticed that a lot of authors who talk like that, myself included, it just feels more organic when you leave that wiggle room in there for your characters to kind of like say, oh, I'm not doing that. Let's try this. It
Yeah.
just, have you ever been surprised by your characters? Like you just totally didn't anticipate something that happens or the way that they respond?
Oh yeah, because I wrote a whole book, a whole first draft, and then my villain in that story was like, well, I wasn't really always a villain, and I felt like it was a Darman episode, like, so you see. And then he took me back to when he went bad, and I'm like, so book one is technically book two because now I have to write book one.
Right.
So I have two full drafts, first drafts, that I just need to dig out. But those are high fantasy because it's like I read it pretty much everything. I adore fantasy. I love fantasy, sci-fi, and of course horror. I feel like I cut my teeth on horror. I love horror, and anything that sort of molds that into it, I'm in love. Like, I read The Scourge. What is The Scourge Between Stars? And it's like space opera meets horror
Oh,
by Ness
wow.
Brown. That book was amazing. I loved A Scourge Between Stars.
See, now you're
So,
something here. We want your recs. Give us your recommendations. So you
oh,
said a script between
A Scourge,
stars.
yeah, A Scourge Between Stars. I love that book. I can't recommend it enough.
Mhm.
I read The Forgotten Girl. It's a YA horror. And I love the fact that you have a girl. She's 10, I think she's like 10, and her best friend is her nerdy neighbor boy. And just they're adapting to a small town mentality and dealing with, just being excluded because of her race. you know, and it's like you have that, then you have she's an older sister to a younger sibling, and just being annoyed with this younger sibling, and just her being who she is, wanting to escape and winding up at like this graveyard, and then the trouble starts. But that trouble actually covers a secret that the town hides. And I love stuff like that where trouble is sort of kind of a secret that's trying to be told.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, the element about horror that I love. Even when it comes to horror movies, I don't like straight out, I'm just going to kill you, just because I like to kill people. I don't like that. I love that motive behind the madness, that thing that drives it. Like I feel like I'm the latest one to the party, but I finally read the Weight of Blood
Mhm.
by Tiffany D. Jackson. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. So I would, yeah, A Weight of Blood, the Weight of Blood, A Scourge Between Stars. Um, I am a fan of, it's sort of not horror, but it's speculative fiction. I
Mhm.
don't know if you can see that. Muscadine Wine by Milton Davis. I'm reading now Gunman's Peace. His work is like, it's a mix of sci-fi with just that urban twist. Even though it's futuristic, you still feel that sense of like neighborhood or just culture, which I love. And then I read Brandon Massey, Dark Corners. That's a great horror piece. It was like one of the blackest horror stories. It was so black and so small town where as soon as someone moves in, by the time they get to their door, everybody in the neighborhood knows who they are. And by the time they walk out their door, you got people randomly walking by. So, hi, how you doing? It had that feel to it. And then when things go dark, I'm like, there are these characters. You got the one character that works hard, and you got that no good cousin that's like, ugh. So, yeah, but Dark Corners, Black and Roots, Zombie Anthology by Mocha Memoirs Press, Slay by Mocha Memoirs Press, Vampire Noir, excellent series. She has Slice Girls, Mocha Memoirs Press, if you like horror. That's a variety of short stories, good stuff. Anything by Milton Davis, I will pick up and read it because I'm a fan of his work, period. But yeah, so those are some of my recs.
Amazing, amazing recs here. So I'm definitely excited to share those. Um, but we haven't done our novel creature question. So for all those who are tuning in, let us know in the comments, what's your favorite reading beverage? And Lacey has the most amazing coffee posts. If you love coffee and you follow her on Instagram, she's always posting like memes and different just fun posts on coffee. So let us know in the comments if you're a coffee drinker, tea drinker, whatever it is. What's your favorite reading beverage? And get specific with it. Let us know your favorite. But on that note, what is your favorite coffee? Or is coffee? Do you like coffees and teas? Or
Oh, I am a big time. I'm a Dunkin' girl.
Mhm.
Sometimes I cheat on Dunkin' with, Starbucks, but that's usually if I have a gift card. So I'll cheat, I'll step out if I have a gift card. So,
What's your favorite roast?
what's funny? I do the regular roast,
Mhm.
and I will add an espresso shot. Because
Oh,
being from Florida, like, that Cuban influence, I have to have that kick with my coffee. Because, like, we have the cafecitos, which are just concentrated espresso.
oh
That
wow.
stuff, that will make curly hair straight, straight hair curly. That stuff is strong.
With you, like if somebody gives me a gift card to a coffee shop, or you want to take me on a coffee date, I'm there. I love coffee. I also love teas though. But also, let us know, how can we best celebrate and support your work?
Well, I think for me, like I'm looking to build my reader community. That's the hardest part because marketing and just reaching out to a lot of readers, that sort of takes away from the writing portion because that's a lot of time. Like I have to hunt, I'm hunting for my readers. And, it's more of trial and error. So if if anyone watching loves dark fantasy with that horror tip, definitely look me up. If people love I love to talk horror movies, sci-fi, connecting with anybody who's into that. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. But yeah, it's like I would love to like just hit me up and say hi, you know. Um if you've read a story, drop a review. That's a great way to support me. But definitely signing up for my newsletter. Um so that way I can keep everybody up to date with what I'm up to because something that I want to offer is being a Marvel nerd and just being any kind of movie nerd, how they have the outtakes. That's something I'm looking into incorporating into my newsletter and
Ooh.
also into some of my books. Like, hey, this is the polished piece, but this didn't make it. What do you think? Type of thing. So just making it more engaging because I know that just like I hunt for people who are into horror. Like I'm very active in like there's a Facebook group called Black Girls in Horror.
Mhm.
We're always posting about our movies, stuff like that, and just yeah, connect with me in that way. Yeah, definitely. Follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and yeah, you'll find coffee memes there, funny kid posts, like cuz kids are funny. They're hilarious. So
It's been such a pleasure to have you here with us. And I'm just like, so many books you've added to my cart already. And, but like with that, can you leave us with a bit of blurred inspiration?
my blur inspiration is a little, I can't say it's cliche, but I feel like everybody says it and it's something that I deeply believe that if you have an idea or a dream, be it a story, be it a piece of art, that even if you don't feel like you're able to, do it. Because I feel like when it comes to storytelling, even your story is yours to tell. The characters that are living in your head, they're your characters. They're only talking to you. They're not, talking to anybody else. So for you to give them a home or to give them life, you gotta do it. You gotta write it. So that's just my thought when it comes to it. Because for me to have gotten as far as I have, it first came with like I used to talk about writing stories when I was in college. One of my friends, she's like, I'm so sick and tired of you hearing you talk about writing a novel. When are you gonna do it? Of course, pride, human pride. I was like, I'm gonna do it now. And then she's like, How what's your plan? Which, that's the thing I never had. She's like, and with her help, hitting my pride, and daring me to do it, I did it. And I dare all of you who are watching this to do it. Do that thing that's always been in the back of your